Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Divya Madan here. This is yet another video. We are continuing nerve muscle physiology. This is a part of series page by page Genong's review of medical physiology. So in the last video we have discussed about resting membrane potential, how this nerve tissue is excitable, what is resting membrane potential, how it is developed, what are the ion channels, the ions that are more found in the intracellular compartment, what are the ions that are found in the extracellular compartment. And in this video we are going to discuss about the genesis of action potential, how action potential is generated, what are the ion fluxes that happen during this action potential, and also a brief mention about we're going to discuss about all or none principle. So before starting this action potential, I just want to brief about the concept of sodium and potassium channels. The main channels that are involved in the generation of this action potential, these are sodium channels and potassium channels. A really important fact that you need to know about these channels is that when it comes to sodium channel, the conductance of this channel, it rises very rapidly. As you can see in this graph, this red line shows the conductance of sodium channel. The conductance of sodium channel, it rises very rapidly, but it is not very prolonged. It declines over time, right? You can see there's an overshoot and it declines over time. It doesn't stay for a long time. But when it comes to sodium potassium channels, the purple line here, this one, right? The purple line, you can see that the conductance, it increases very gradually and it stays for a longer time. It's prolonged and it falls. There is no rapid upshoot and then fall, right? So these are the major things that you need to know about this, right? The sodium channel conductance increases very rapidly and then falls also. When it comes to potassium channel, it is very gradual. It stays for a long time, prolonged, right? So these are the two major things that you need to know before understanding the concept of action potential. We have discussed in the previous video that the resting membrane potential of that of a neuron is minus 70 millivolt, and it is very similar to the potassium, your potassium channel potential, right? So at rest, the channel that is mostly active is the channel that is mostly active is potassium channel. So there is constant leaking of the channel, but the resting membrane potential is maintained by our sodium potassium ATPase that moves against the gradient, right? So let's begin. What is action potential and how it is generated? So if these both channel, sodium channel and potassium channel, we will start with a depolarizing stimulus, right? Whenever there is some kind of stimulus for the generation of action potential, this is known as the depolarizing stimulus, okay? And as soon as this stimulus reaches the threshold potential, what is the threshold potential? Threshold potential is that potential above which an action potential is generated. It is the minimum amount of the potential difference that is required for a generation of action potential, okay? So you can see here that this is the resting membrane potential of a nerve, minus 70, right? A depolarizing stimulus is given, and as soon as this depolarizing stimulus is given, there is increase in the conductance of sodium channel due to change in this potential. Sodium channel begin to open, right? Firstly, you can see that the conductance is increasing, right? Imagine there is a membrane and there are a lot of channels over it. So initially only 2 sodium channels are open. Then as soon as the potential difference increases, the resting membrane potential uprises, more and more channels are open. This is known as positive feedback loop, okay? So what happens here is, whenever there is a depolarizing stimulus, this depolarizing stimulus will change the potential difference across this membrane, and this change in the potential difference or voltage opens the sodium channel. Opening of the sodium channel causes more influx of sodium into the cell. More influx of sodium, what would it do? It would again increase or depolarizing the membrane, causing the potential difference. That will cause further opening of the sodium channels, right? So there is a positive feedback loop. Opening of sodium channel causes more potential difference, causes more opening. So this is a positive feedback loop. This positive feedback loop starts, and there is gradual increase in the conductance of sodium channel over time, and thus there is overshoot of the action potential, in which there are a lot of sodium channels that are open, right? But we have studied the property of sodium channels, that they open really fast, but their conduction there is not prolonged. The conductance is not prolonged. They fall also really rapidly. Okay, so then they fall, right? As soon as the stimulus is gone, there is inactivation of sodium channel after a certain point of time, because the conduction is very short lived. Okay, then comes the concept of conductance of potassium channel. Whenever there is a depolarizing stimulus that is caused by sodium influx, there will also be opening of voltage gated potassium channels, right? This potassium channel opening would cause increased conduction of the potassium channel, so potassium ions will go outside, right? This further increased flow of potassium outside will cause a depolarization of the membrane, and that repolarization of membrane will break the voltage difference that has opened these channels. So this is kind of a negative feedback loop when it comes to potassium channel. We have studied that in case of sodium channel, this opening of sodium channels were causing more influx of the sodium into the cell, and this influx of sodium into the cell was causing even more potential difference that would in fact increasing even more opening of this channel. But when it comes to potassium, as there is movement of potassium outside the cell, this voltage difference is braked, and hence that stops the further opening of these voltage gated channels. So there is a negative feedback loop when it comes to potassium channel, right? So coming back to action potential, we have seen that there is a resting membrane potential. When we give a depolarizing stimulus, number of voltage gated sodium channels are opened, simultaneous number of voltage gated potassium channels are opened, but because of the difference in the conductance, we the net voltage difference is higher, and there is a shoot, right? The threshold stimulus above which an action potential is developed, it is here, that is minus 55 in case of nerve. It upshoots to 30 millivolt and then falls down. We have seen that the depolarizing or conductance of potassium channel is very prolonged. So there is a state of hyperpolarization that is also noted. So the cause of hyperpolarization is this very property of potassium channels, that is they stay open for a longer time or prolonged duration. Okay, so that's about the generation of an action potential. What are the ion fluxes that happen? This is a really beautiful diagram that is shown here. You can see that the conductance of sodium channel, the conduction of potassium channel. The black one is the resultant, the ultimate action potential that is developed as a result of opening and closing of these channels, right? Above that, sodium and potassium channels are also made. In this starting, you can see that both the channels are closed. As soon as the threshold potential is achieved, sodium channels are opened, right? In the middle period, both the potassium channels will be open and sodium channel closed, and in the last phase, the potassium channel remain open and sodium channel reset, right? Now comes the concept of all or none principle. All of none principle, we have seen that there is a certain threshold voltage above which the action potential is generated, right? So it is given by the strength duration curve. They say that a minimal intensity of the stimulating current that is given for a given duration will just produce an action potential. That means to generate an action potential, we need a certain minimum amount of intensity of that stimulating current, and that too for a given duration of time, right? Then only action potential will be generated. As soon as you increase the strength, the duration required would be less, right? Makes sense. If you give a high voltage current, that would require less time to generate an action potential, whereas if you give a less strength current intensity, that would obviously require a more duration to produce the same effect, right? And also a very gradually rising current will also not produce your action potential because of a property called adaptation. So either there would be a generation of current, either, or there would not be. So this is known as all or none, right? You can see here, once a threshold intensity is reached, a full-fledged action potential is produced, right? And further increase in the intensity of the stimulus will produce no increment or other change in the action potential as long as other experimental conditions remain constant. And an action potential fails to occur if the stimulus is sub-threshold in magnitude, and it occurs with an amplitude, occurs with the constant amplitude and form regardless of the strength of the stimulus if the stimulus is at or above the threshold intensity, right? And the action potential is therefore an all or none in character. That means it requires a minimum strength for a given duration, then only action potential will be generated. Anything above or below it won't work, right? So that's the all or none action potential. In the next video, we are going to continue and wrap up this. We will be discussing the types of mammalian nerve fibers and the classification, clinical box about local anesthesia, and certain nerve growth factors. And then we will summarize this chapter in the last video. So this chapter will be covered in a series of 6 videos. I hope this was helpful. Go read Genong after watching this video. I hope this video helps in making things easier for you, and do solve MCQs. Also, referring to the last video, very few of you have answered the question of retrograde transport. Yes, it is the rabies virus that gains access to our nerves through retrograde transport, and those who have marked this correctly, very good. And let's see, there would be a quiz session also that I will be posting on the community page. So looking forward to being more consistent. Thank you. Have a nice day.